cut flowers die. That is the first thing, the most basic thing, the thing that does not require a medical degree or a nursing license or 9 years of overnight neuro-trauma experience to understand. You cut a flower from its stem, you put it in a vase of water, and it begins to die. Slowly in stages, in the specific graceful collapse of something that is working through what remains after the connection to its source has been severed. Petals lose their tension, colors go from vivid to faded, stems soften. Within a week or 10 days, depending on the flower and the room, it is done. That is how flowers work. The flowers near Sarah's patients did not work that way. The families of long-term neuro-trauma patients bring flowers. I have watched them do this for 9 years, and I have come to understand what the flowers, not decoration, not sentiment in the casual sense, but the specific act of a person who needs to do something in a situation where doing something is not available, and who has arrived at flowers as the closest approximation. You bring flowers because you cannot bring healing. You bring them because the room is hard and you want to soften it. You bring them because you were here and you wanted your presence to remain when your body had to leave. I understand the flowers. I have always understood them. I did not understand until Sarah arrived on 12 North why certain flowers were staying alive past the point where flowers stay alive. In the rooms she visited most. In the vases near the patients she sat with. The flowers were fresh in a way that flowers at 10, 11, 12 days past cutting have no right to be fresh, vivid, full. The specific living quality of something that has not been separated from its source at all. I noticed it in month 3. A patient in Bay 6, a 41-year-old man, severe TBI from a construction accident, in the specific altered state of a brain that has sustained significant injury, and is working through whether it intends to come back, had a bouquet of sunflowers on his bedside table that his wife had brought on the day of his admission. I know the date because I was there when she brought them. I watched her put them in the plastic vase and fill it from the bathroom tap and set it on the table the way you set something down with great care, because the act of setting it down carefully is the only careful act available to you right now. 11 days later, the sunflowers were identical to the day she brought them. I stood in Bay 6 and looked at those sunflowers for a long time. Then I went back to work, because the ward needed me and the sunflowers did not have a framework, and the things without a framework had to wait. They waited for 18 months. Then April 19th arrived and made waiting impossible. Before this story breaks your heart and rebuilds it again, please subscribe to this channel, ring that bell, and drop a comment below telling me which town or city you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. My name is Marcus Webb. Overnight neuro-trauma, 12 North, St. Augustine's Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. 9 years. Neuro-trauma is its own category of work. The patients on 12 North have sustained injuries to the brain or the spinal cord, traumatic brain injuries from accidents and violence and falls, and the specific ways that the human skull, which is durable but not indestructible, encounters forces it was not designed for. They are not like other patients. They are present in a way that is different from the ordinary presence of a conscious person, and absent in a way that is different from the ordinary absence of a sleeping one. The state of altered consciousness that significant brain injury produces is not sleep, and is not waking, and is not death, and caring for someone in that state requires a specific kind of nurse. A nurse who can be present for a person who cannot acknowledge the presence, who can speak to someone who may not hear and touch someone who may not feel, and who can maintain that presence night after night without either performing it or abandoning it. That is the work of 12 North. Sarah arrived on the ward 18 months before April 19th. She arrived the way the best people arrive on overnight wards, already present, already purposeful, already trusted by the patients before the trust had been formally earned. She was at the nurse's station when I came in for my shift one night, and she had the quality I had spent 9 years learning to recognize in the people who were going to be good at this work, the quality of someone who is entirely here, not performing here, actually here. I assumed she had transferred from another facility. I did not verify this immediately because the ward needed her and immediately was not available. I told myself I would verify later. April 19th was later. Oh. The first thing I noticed about Sarah, before the flowers, before everything else, was the patience. Specifically, the way the most unresponsive patients on the ward responded to her. Neurotrauma patients in deep states of altered consciousness do not typically respond to nursing staff by name. They do not turn their heads when a nurse enters the room. They do not change their breathing pattern or their facial expression in response to the presence of a specific person. The neurological pathways that support those responses are frequently the pathways that have been injured, and their absence is not a measure of who is visiting, but a measure of what the injury has done to the systems that would normally register a visit. The patients turned their heads when Sarah entered the room. Not all of them, every time, but consistently enough that I started paying attention to it, which means I noticed it more than once before I started paying attention, which means it was already a pattern before I consciously registered it as one. A patient in Bay 2, a 28-year-old woman, TBI from a motorcycle accident, GCS of 6 for 11 days, turned her head toward the door when Sarah walked in on a Tuesday. Not dramatically, not the full deliberate turn of a conscious person responding to a sound. The small, imprecise movement of a head whose owner is somewhere between awareness and its absence, registering something that the instruments cannot measure. I documented it in my private notes, not in the clinical chart, in my private notes. Because what I was documenting was not a clinical observation, but something else, something that did not have a category in the clinical framework, and putting something without a clinical category in a clinical chart requires a confidence in the observation that I was not yet ready to commit to. I documented it 6 more times over the following months. 6 different patients, 6 different rooms, the same specific small response. Then I noticed the medication log. The secure cabinet on 12 North requires a valid staff PIN for access. The PIN is assigned at employment and linked to the employee's record in the HR system. When I ran the PIN number that appeared in Sarah's medication entries, the entries that appeared in the log regularly, consistently, correctly, the HR system returned no matching employee. I ran it twice. No matching employee. I had the valid entries. I had the correct PN format. I did not have the employee the PN was supposed to belong to. I put this in the same category as the head turns and the flowers. The category without a framework. The category I kept adding to and not examining because examining it required saying things out loud that I was not ready to say. The thing that finally moved Moord toward saying them was a conversation with a patient's husband. His name was Gerald Park. His wife Diana had been in Bay 4 for 6 weeks following a hemorrhagic stroke that had left her in a state that her neurologist described, carefully and precisely, as requiring significant time before any assessment of long-term outcome would be meaningful. Gerald came every day during visiting hours. He was a retired high school principal, 63 years old, with the specific quality of a man who has spent his professional life managing situations by understanding them thoroughly, and who was encountering, for the first time, a situation that thoroughness could not manage. He stopped me in the corridor one morning as I was heading out after a shift. He said, "The nurse, the one with the blonde hair who comes at night." I said, "Sarah," he said, "Diana responds to her. I know you told me Diana is not responding to stimulus. I know what the chart says. I am telling you that when I come in the morning, after that nurse has been on the floor, Diana is different. Her face is different. The tension in her hands is different." He looked at me with the specific earnest directness of a man who has been a principal too long to soften what he means. "Something that nurse does helps my wife. I do not know what it is. I am telling you it is real," I said. "I believe you, Gerald," he said. "Can you tell me who she is? Where she trained?" "I want to thank her properly," I said. "I will find out." I said this knowing that I had already tried to find out, and had found the gap where the answer should have been. Gerald nodded and went back to his wife. I went to the administrative archive, not the current system. The deep historical records, the digitized scans of old paper files in the back end that nobody accesses, because nothing relevant should be back there. I started searching. I did not finish before April 19th arrived. The service entrance of St. Augustine's is on the north side of the building, accessible from the loading bay that the maintenance and supplies use during the day, and that sits empty and unused through the overnight hours. I heard the vehicles before anything else. Two of them, moving with the specific speed of vehicles whose drivers have decided that the service road leading to the loading bay is navigable at a velocity it was not designed for. Then the specific sound of the loading bay door, not its standard slow hydraulic opening but a fast, decisive contact, the sound of someone who knows exactly how to work a door and has moved it on purpose. 6 people came through it, dark clothes over plate carriers, armed. Moving through the loading corridor and into the ward elevator with the compressed, automatic efficiency of people who clear spaces together as a professional practice. I had spent 9 years treating military patients from Fort Bragg and the surrounding installations. I know what this looks like. Their leader reached the 12 North Nurses Station in 30 seconds. She was tall, angular, with the specific economy of movement of someone who has never in their adult life made a physical gesture that was not intentional. A federal credential in front of me before I had fully processed that she was standing there. Lieutenant Commander Eve Strand, she said. Naval Special Warfare Command, SEAL Team 4. My man has a blast TBI compounded by a penetrating chest wound. He has been field stabilized. The stabilization is not holding. He carries intelligence from an active operation that I cannot describe to you and that matters to people I cannot name. I need your best bay and your team. Right now, she was not asking. She was also right that she did not need to. Bay 3. Move. Chief Petty Officer Daniel Cross was enormous in the way that certain operators are enormous, not the performed bulk of someone who has worked to be large, but the functional density of someone whose body has been shaped by years of carrying weight in difficult terrain and doing it without complaint. The blast TBI was the primary problem. The mechanism, a vehicle-borne IED, per Strand's medic's report, produces a specific injury pattern, and the specific injury pattern in Daniel Cross's case had produced a neurological picture that I read in the first 40 seconds of assessment and understood the way you understand things after 9 years of neuro-trauma, immediately, completely, and with the specific weight of knowledge that does not soften the understanding. The chest wound was the secondary problem and the more immediately lethal one. The penetrating fragment had nicked something in the right chest that was bleeding in the slow, internal way of injuries that do not announce themselves dramatically, and that kill you without drama, when they are not caught. His BP, when I first read it, was low enough that I did not say the number out loud. I looked at my team. My team looked at me. We worked. Strand came into Bay 3 and I let her. She stationed herself against the wall inside the door, and she was still, and she watched with the contained, operational stillness of someone who has been in situations where the only available contribution is to stay out of the way, and who has the discipline to actually do that. Her team distributed in the corridor outside the bay glass. We pushed everything we had. The neurological picture did not improve. The chest picture improved slightly on the volume, and then plateaued. The plateau was not a stable plateau. It was the plateau of something that is not going down yet, but has not found a reason to go up. Then the monitor said what it said. The flat, continuous, unbroken sound. I looked at my team. My colleague Preeti had both hands on the bed rail, not pushing, resting, the posture of someone who is not ready to step back, and who is not yet being asked to. The respiratory tech had gone very still. I looked at Strand. She had not moved from the wall. She had not made a sound. She looked at the monitor with the eyes of someone who has been in situations where looking away from the worst thing is not permitted, and who is not looking away. I looked at the flowers. The flowers in Bay 3 were in a vase on the bedside table. A family had brought them on the day the bay was last occupied before Cross arrived. A different patient, long discharged, and the family had left the flowers because the flowers were still fresh, and it seemed wasteful to remove fresh flowers from a hospital room. I had left them. Fresh flowers in a neuro-trauma bay cost nothing and improve everything, and these were as fresh as the morning they had been brought. 11 days ago, I was looking at them when the monitor flatlined. I was looking at them because they were in my sightline, and because in the specific moment of a flatline there is a breath between the sound of it and the resumption of action, a fraction of a second in which the brain registers what the ears have just received, and in that fraction of a second, I was looking at the vase of flowers on the bedside table. Every petal fell, not one at a time, not in the gradual softening of flowers that have reached their limit. Every petal, from every flower in the vase, fell simultaneously, in the space of a single breath. The vase was full and vivid, and then the petals were on the table and the floor, and the bare stems were standing in the water, and the vase smelled intensely, briefly, of flowers the way a room smells when something that has been held is released. I stared at the stems. The respiratory tech said, "Did you?" "Yes," I said. One of Strand's operators outside the bay glass stepped forward involuntarily. She did not push through the door. She stopped herself. But she stepped forward. I looked at the bay door. Sarah was already through it. Not opening it. Already through it. Present the way she was always present. Without the transitional steps. Without the movement from one side of the door to the other. Simply in the room, already at the bed. Pale green scrubs. Blonde hair loose for once, not in its usual ponytail. Her face carrying the expression I had been trying to name for 18 months. I had not been able to name it before this moment. I named it now. Purpose. Not purpose in the goal-oriented professional sense, the older kind. The purpose of something that has been moving toward a specific point from a very long distance, and has arrived at it, and knows it. The temperature in Bay 3 dropped. It dropped the way it always dropped when she entered a room, ahead of her, the cold moving into the space before the woman did. Except this time the woman was already in the space, which meant the cold and she arrived together, which meant whatever distance usually existed between her arrival and the cold's arrival had close to nothing. She reached the bed. She placed her bare hands on Daniel Cross's chest. Both of them. Not over the dressings. On them. Her palms flat against the surface in the specific positioned way of someone who understands exactly what is underneath. She leaned down. Her lips moved near his ear. I could not hear the words. I have worked alongside her for 18 months, and I have never once been able to hear the words. They do not travel through the air the way sound travels. They arrive somewhere else, in the chest. In the specific place in the chest where certain things arrive before you know you have received them. Strand moved, not toward Sarah, toward the door. Not to open it or go through it, to be closer. She moved with the involuntary, unconscious movement of someone being pulled towards something by a force they did not know was acting on them. She stopped when she reached the glass. She pressed one hand flat against it. She was looking at Sarah with an expression I had not yet seen on her face, and that I understood, when I saw it, was the thing that had been underneath the operational stillness the entire time she had been in this building. She recognized her. The monitor made a sound. One beat. Tentative. The kind that 9 years of this work teaches you to receive without calling, because calling it before the second beat risks the specific, devastating hope of a false alarm. The second beat came. The third was stronger. Pretty said, her voice completely flat, clinical, the flatness of a nurse maintaining professional function in a moment that is testing every boundary of professional function. He has a rhythm. Marcus. He has a rhythm. I hear it. It is organizing. It is sinus. His pressure is a pause. His pressure is climbing. I have a pressure. It is climbing. I looked at Sarah. She was straightening up. Her hands lifting from his chest. The posture of someone who has done what they came to do, and is holding the space around it while the thing takes hold. She looked at Daniel Cross's face. She looked at him the way you look at someone you have been worried about for a long time, when the thing you were worried about has resolved, not relief. Something quieter than relief. The specific quality of someone who has been carrying a concern and is setting it down. The neurosurgical team came through the bay door 30 seconds later. Paged from the moment Strand's man arrived, finally here, Dr. Okafor moving fast with her team and going directly to the patient. She read the monitor. She read Cross. She looked at me. Where did them come from? I looked at the bay. Sarah was gone. The door had not opened. I was 8 feet from the door and it had not opened. The operators in the corridor had not moved. I looked at the floor. The petals that had fallen from the vase were scattered across the bedside table and the floor. Vivid, fresh, still the specific vivid fresh of flowers that have not been separated from their source. They had fallen from stems that had given up everything at once, and the petals themselves had given up nothing. In the space beside Cross's bed where Sarah had stood, the petals were undisturbed. She had been there. And the petals around her feet were arranged exactly as they had fallen, as though the woman standing among them had occupied no space, displaced no air, applied no weight. Get him to neurosurgical, I told Dr. Okafor. He is holding right now. They moved. Strand stayed. She was looking at the petals on the floor, at the space among them, at the vase of bare stems on the bedside table. She said, "Tell me about the nurse." I told her everything. The flowers and the patients who turned their heads and the pin that matched no employee, and the 18 months of small wrongnesses I had been adding to the framework-less category and not examining. I told her about Gerald Park and his wife Diana, and what he had said about the difference in Diana's face on the mornings after Sarah's shifts. I told her about the petals. Strand listened with total, undivided attention, not the listening of someone waiting for their turn to speak. The listening of someone who is receiving information they have been waiting for without knowing they were waiting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she opened her device. She went directly to the file. Not searching, going. She knew what she was looking for before she opened the device, which meant she had known before she walked through the service entrance, which meant the expression I had seen on her face through the bay glass, the recognition, had been recognition in the most literal sense. She turned the screen toward me. The photograph was Sarah. Every time I have written this sentence in the accounts I keep, I have tried to find a way to qualify it, to say it resembled her, or that there were strong similarities, or that under certain conditions you could see the connection. There is no honest way to write those sentences. The photograph was Sarah, the face I had looked at for 18 months on the overnight neuro-trauma ward at St. Augustine's Medical Center, the specific quality of the eyes, the set of the mouth, the particular density of the expression, the sense of someone who carries a great deal in a small space. The name on the file was not Sarah Kellerman, Sarah Ann. It read, Petty Officer First Class, E6, Haas, Hospital Corpsman, Chim. CL Team 4 Attack Medical Support. Killed in action. Mosul, Iraq, 10 years ago. I read it. I read it again. I looked at the photograph. I read it a third time because sometimes the third reading is what makes a thing real. She was yours, I said. She was ours, Strand said. The word ours doing something specific, not institutional, personal. The possessive of someone who means it from the inside. What happened? Strand looked at the bay, at the bare stems in the vase, at the petals on the floor around the space where Sarah had stood. Ambush, she said. Mosul, a position we were holding while a civilian evacuation completed. We were hit from 2 sides, 4 casualties in the first 90 seconds. She stopped. She breathed. Sarah went to them in the order she always went to them, worst first, then second worst, then third. She managed the first 3. She was on the 4th when they hit her position directly. She looked at the device in her hands. The 4th casualty survived, Daniel Cross. He was 24 years old. He survived because she got to him and stayed with him past the point where staying was survivable. He dedicated his career, I said. Everything, Strand said. Everything he has done since Mosul has been. I have watched him for 10 years. I have watched him make every choice in the direction of justifying what she gave. Every hard training pipeline, every volunteer deployment, every time he went forward when he could have gone back, all of it in that direction. She looked at the bay where Daniel Cross had been, and was no longer. Tonight he was dying, and she came back for him. I pulled up the administrative archive on the nurses' station terminal. I did not need to search. I had been searching before April 19th, and I had been close, and finding the rest was a matter of continuing from where I had stopped. The record loaded in the form of a scanned badge photograph from the old system, the system before the current renovation. The designer recognized from a framed institutional photograph in the hospital's administrative corridor. Salerman, A-R-N-E-B-S-N. St. Augustine's Medical Center. Neuro-trauma ward, 12 North. Overnight rotation, 6 years. Starting date 10 years before she enlisted. Ending date the week she left for the Navy. She learned this work here, I said. 6 years of overnight neuro-trauma nursing on this ward. She learned what it means to be present for a person whose mind is fighting to stay connected to their body. She learned it here, in these rooms, with these patients. And when she died in Mosul, I stopped. I looked at the vase of bare stems. I looked at the petals on the floor, vivid, fresh, still the same vivid fresh as the morning they were cut 11 days ago. Still alive in the way of things that have not accepted the separation from their source. She came back to both places. She knew how to save lives, I said. A street in Mosul, and this ward. Strand looked at the petals for a long time. She said, the flowers, yes. She kept them alive. I think she kept everything she could alive, I said. That is who she was. That is what this ward taught her. You do not let things die that can be kept alive. You stay with them past the point where staying is comfortable. You hold on. Strand closed the device. She looked at me. She said she did not stop holding on. Did she? No, I said. I think she held on for 10 years. The surgery was long, and the outcome was the outcome that the surgery was capable of producing, which was better than anyone had the right to expect, given what Daniel Cross had arrived with. Dr. Okafor found us in the corridor after it was over, and she said he was alive. She said the neurological picture was going to require time, and the chest repair had held, and he was alive. She used the word remarkable in the careful way of a surgeon who does not use words carelessly. She said it once and meant it, and went back to her patient. They moved Daniel Cross to a secured recovery bay on 12 North, glass walls. Strand's operators outside. He was sedated. Strand and I stood in the corridor outside the glass, bad coffee that neither of us was drinking. Her team distributed along the hallway. The ward was doing what overnight wards do in the hours before the morning shift, the specific provisional quiet of a floor that is between events, running at its maintenance level, the monitors and the ventilators and the ambient sound of a building that does not stop. Charlotte outside the east window was beginning, not dawn yet. The suggestion of it, the specific gradation of a southern city's pre-dawn, the sky going from black to something that is not yet a color, but is no longer the absence of one. The Piedmont quiet of a city that takes its mornings at its own pace. The temperature dropped. I had felt this drop 18 months of nights. I knew its quality. The cold that was not HVAC, not a draft, not any mechanical explanation. The cold of her, but different. The previous drops were arrivals. This was something else. The cold of completion, the specific quality of something that has reached its end after a very long journey, and is, in the reaching, releasing everything it has been holding to get there. My breath went white in the air. Strands. Each operator along the corridor, one by one. The frost formed on the glass of Cross's recovery bay in the branching, crystalline pattern, the frost of her presence, the signature she left on surfaces that was specific and unmistakable once you knew to look for it. At the end of the corridor, where the east window faced the pre-dawn sky, Sarah came out of the space between the light and the dark. Pale green scrubs, blonde hair loose, the face I had been looking at for 18 months. The weight was gone. I had always felt the weight in her, not as an expression, not as something she performed, but as a quality of the air around her. The specific density of someone who is carrying something enormous and has been carrying it for long enough that the carrying is no longer an act but a condition. It was part of what she was, the way the cold was part of what she was and the flowers were part of what she was. Gone. What was there instead was something I had seen in patients on this ward, in the ones who had fought the hardest, and who had arrived, after the fighting, at a place of settlement. Not peace in the achieved sense, peace in the arrived sense, the peace of someone who has done what they were going to do and has nothing left to do, and is resting in that. She walked down the corridor. Strand's hand went to her sidearm. It came away, one deliberate movement. Her hand dropping back to her side, her shoulders squaring in the small, precise way of someone choosing their posture on purpose. "Stand down," she said. The words carrying down the corridor to each of her operators. "All of you. That is a direct order. Stand down." They stood down. Sarah reached Cross's recovery bay. The door opened. She went inside. Strand and I crossed to the glass. We cleared small circles in the frost and looked through. Cross was awake. The sedation had a timeline, and the timeline said not yet. He was awake with the direct, clear eyes of a man who has come a long way, and who is looking at exactly the person he expected to find at the end of the distance. He looked at Sarah the way you look at someone you have been carrying for 10 years. Not with surprise, with the look of someone who has been waiting to say something for a very long time and has arrived at the moment of saying it, and finds that the moment is as large as they expected. The tears came without management. He was a 14-year SEAL operator, and the tears came anyway, and he did not try to stop them because stopping them was not the honest thing. Sarah stood at his bedside. She raised her hand above his face, not touching, hovering, presence, not intervention. The work was done. This was the rest of it. I read her lips through the frosted glass. She said, "My watch is over, Daniel. You gave it meaning. Everything I gave you, you gave back tenfold. I watched you do it." His mouth moved. Through the glass and the frost I caught the shape of the words. He said, "I kept every promise I made." She smiled, the smile I had watched for 18 months, the private one, the real one, the one that was always there behind the weight, without the weight now. Just the smile, the thing itself, unmixed. She turned from the bed. She walked back to the door. She stepped into the corridor. Lieutenant Commander Eve Strand moved. Her heels came together. The sound of it in the corridor was precise and deliberate, a sound made with intention, with the full weight of what the intention meant. She squared her shoulders. Her right hand came up. The salute was not a ceremony. It was a debt being paid. The specific, complete, irreducible acknowledgement of someone who is being saluted for what they actually did rather than what a ceremony records. "Detail," Strand said, her voice steady, deliberately, precisely steady. "Attention." 5 operators came to attention in the corridor, together, exact, the unified movement of people who have been trained to move as one and who are doing it now, at full weight, for this. Prisoned arms. 5 right hands rose. I stood against the wall. I am a nurse. I am not military. I have no standing in that vocabulary. I knew what I was watching. Every nurse who has ever stood beside a military patient who did not make it. Every nurse who has ever held a hand that was not going to get better and stayed anyway. Every nurse who has ever been the person in the room at the worst moment. I think they would all know what they were watching. The most highly trained operators available being brought to their fullest attention. In a neurotrauma ward corridor in Charlotte, for a woman who had kept flowers alive and patients alive and promises alive for 10 years past the morning they took her. Sarah walked down the corridor. She walked with the pace she had always had, unhurried, direct, the pace of someone who has been exactly where they needed to be for every step of a very long journey, and who is now taking the last steps of it with the same quality of presence they brought to the first ones. She passed each operator. She passed Strand. Strand held her salute, eyes forward. The muscles in her jaw the only evidence of what the stillness was costing. Sarah stopped in front of her. She looked at Eve Strand. She raised her hand. The salute was exact. The training was in every degree of it. The salute of a petty officer first class returning the salute of a lieutenant commander. Precise, complete, military. Strand did not move. Her eyes stayed forward. But something in her face changed in the specific way that faces change when a thing they have been waiting for arrives. Sarah lowered her hand. She turned toward the window. The Charlotte dawn was in it. The Piedmont light arriving the way it always arrives, patient, unhurried, the light of a place that does not perform its mornings. It came through the glass and found the corridor and found Sarah in her pale green scrubs and her loose blonde hair and the expression that was not wait anymore, but was what came after wait. She walked into it. The way you walk into something you have been moving toward for a very long time, and that is exactly as you always understood it would be. The light received her. The corridor at the end held only light. The frost on Cross's Bay melted. The temperature returned. The specific warm quality of a neuro-trauma ward room came back into the corridor, the warmth of a place that tends to living things and is doing it right now, all around them, in every room along the hall. Strand lowered her hand. Her operators followed. She looked at the window for a moment. She said quietly to the light, Petty Officer Kellerman, "Well done. You are dismissed." Then she picked up her cold coffee and she drank it. They left before the day shift arrived. Daniel Cross went with them. Military transport, Walter Reed, Strand in the vehicle ahead of his. He was alive. Dr. Okafor had said remarkable, and she had meant it, and remarkable was enough. Strand stopped at the nurse's station before she left. She looked at the flowers on the station counter. There were 3 vases there. Flowers brought by families of current patients, arranged in the space the overnight staff had cleared for them, because cleared space for flowers was a thing 12 North did, and had done for as long as anyone remembered. The flowers were all vivid. All of them, not just the ones near Sarah's patients, the ones near every patient on the floor. I had not noticed this before. I had been tracking the flowers near specific patients, the ones she visited most. I had not taken the full inventory of the ward. Every flower on 12 North was as fresh as the morning it arrived. Strand looked at them for a long time. She said she kept the whole floor. I said she kept everything she could. Strand nodded once. She walked out. I went to Bay 3. The bare stems were in the vase. The petals were on the floor and the table and the surfaces around the bed. Still vivid. Still the specific fresh of something that has not accepted separation. I stood in the doorway and looked at them for a while. Then I went to the supply room and got a fresh vase and filled it with water, and I gathered the petals from the floor and the table, every one of them, and I placed them in the fresh water. I know that is not how flowers work. You cannot revive cut petals by putting them in water. Petals separated from their stems are not going to reattach or revive, or do anything other than what separated petals do. These petals did not wilt. They floated in the fresh water exactly as they had lain on the floor. Vivid, full, the specific, undimmed quality of solidity of something that is still connected to whatever makes it live. I left them on the counter at the nurse's station. The day shift nurse who came in an hour later looked at the vase and said, "Those are beautiful." "What kind of flowers?" I said. "I am not entirely sure." She nodded and went to her desk. Sarah has not been back on the ward since April 19th. The overnight shifts run without her. The same floor, the same bays, the same specific and demanding work of a unit that tends to people whose minds are fighting to stay connected to their bodies. The nurses who do this work do it with the same quality they have always brought to it, the quality you cannot teach, the quality that is either there or isn't, the quality that this floor has always found ways to attract in the people who apply to work it, but the ward carries her. The flowers are the most obvious evidence. They are not as extreme now as they were during her 18 months. The flowers do not stay indefinitely fresh the way they did when she was on the floor, but they last longer than they should. Every family who has ever commented on it, and several have, in the specific careful way of people who are not sure whether to trust what they are observing, has commented in terms of how fresh the flowers stayed, how much longer than expected, how the room felt different in a way that the flowers were a small part of. The patients still turn their heads, less often than during her time on the ward, but still. The most unresponsive patients on the worst nights, in the rooms that most need what she brought, sometimes they turn. A fraction. The small, imprecise movement of a head registering something that the instruments can not measure. I document it in my private notes. The pin in the medication log still appears occasionally. Not every night, not the way it appeared when she was actively on the floor, consistently, regularly. Occasionally, the specific entry of someone who comes in now and then, not on a schedule, to check. I stopped trying to match it to an employee in the system. I know whose pin it is. Gerald Park's wife Diana began showing signs of responsiveness 6 weeks after April 19th. Nothing dramatic. The gradual, incremental return of awareness that neuro-trauma recovery sometimes produces. The specific process of a brain finding its way back from injury. She is not fully recovered. The road is long. But she is on the road, and the road is going in the right direction, and Gerald comes every day, and he looks at the flowers in her room, and he has stopped asking me who the blonde nurse is. I think he knows. I think he has always known, in the specific way that the families of neurotrauma patients know things that the clinical framework does not give them language for. The families on this ward have always known things. That is part of what it means to be on this ward. You become fluent in the things that cannot be measured, because the things that can be measured are not the whole story of what is happening in these rooms. I still work the overnight neurotrauma ward at St. Augustine's Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. 9 years has become 11. The ward is the ward. The patients are the patients. The specific demanding work of 12 North continues in the way that it continues, without pause, without sentiment, with the complete and undivided attentiveness that the work requires, and that the people who choose this work bring to it every night. On the nights when a code is going badly, when the monitor is saying what it says and I have run everything available and the team is looking at me, I do the thing I have done since April 19th. I look at the flowers. I look at the flowers in the room and I watch them. I watch for the drop, the simultaneous release of every petal at once, the specific thing that happened in Bay 3 when Daniel Cross flatlined, and that I understand now was not a random event, but a signal. The ward communicating something to the people in it. The flowers doing what they had always been doing, registering her presence, marking the rooms she occupied, keeping alive what she touched. The flowers never drop. Not since April 19th, not once. Her watch is over, and she walked into a Charlotte dawn, and she is somewhere better than a neurotrauma ward corridor and good. She earned everything that comes after a watch like that. She earned every petal of it. But I look at the flowers, because looking is the honest thing. Because 11 years of this work and 18 months of Sarah have made me the kind of nurse who looks at the things that cannot be explained and does not look away from what the looking finds. Because she kept the flowers alive, and she kept the patients alive, and she kept promises alive for 10 years past the morning they should have ended, and the least I can do is keep looking. Because the flowers in Bay 4 are 11 days old today, and they are as vivid as the morning they arrived, and I have stopped wondering why. If you love this type of intense nurse-taking action tales, hit that like button, share the video with your fellow thrill seekers, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a new story.